Tucked away on Disney Plus through the Uncanny Valley remakes and under piles of Air Bud movies lies a hidden gem of the Disney Lucasfilm era, an anthology series of animated shorts that pushes the form and aesthetic of Star Wars into new territory: Visions. What started off as a one-off foray into anime in Season 1, Visions truly blossomed with its second season, when the scope of the show expanded beyond Japan to animation houses from all over the world, working in a wider variety of styles and genres. The assignment to these studios from Lucasfilm: make a short film uniquely inspired by your own country's culture, that explores new corners of the Star Wars galaxy. And since these are specifically non-canon stories, they're given an unprecedented creative canvas that's sorely lacking in the shows that are more chained to pre-established lore. If Ahsoka is a show for people who only watch Star Wars, Visions is something that feels more engaged with the broader culture outside of the franchise's escapist bubble. You see that in the Stars, the short from Chile's Punk Robot, which evokes the real-life indigenous struggle for water rights in South America, with the Empire framed as an industrialized, genocidal colonial power. The Spy Dancer from Studio La Cachette uses the imagery of a World War II-era French cabaret as a stylish watercolor backdrop for a heart-wrenching twist on the classic Rebel vs. Empire conflict. Or how Aardman's I Am Your Mother imagines what if Star Wars was set in Manchester, England. Though by far my favorite short from Visions comes from Irish studio Cartoon Saloon, and it may be the best Star Wars thing of all time. No joke, SCREECHER'S REACH is a masterpiece, even by the towering standards of its studio. A simple narrative about a girl and her friends seeking freedom and adventure beyond their meager lives unfurls into a provocative piece of Celtic-infused folk horror that upends, some would say subvert, the most indelible of Star Wars iconography and lore. Like with Cartoon Saloon's previous work, the short approaches heavy and dark subject matter without ever talking down to a younger audience, all while evocatively drawn in the studio's distinctly textured house style, where whimsy, wonder, and danger all coexist. In just 12 minutes, Saloon spins a gripping campfire ghost tale, full of hair-raising twists that pulls you through a veritable gauntlet of emotions, and landing on a truly unforgettable final image. SCREECHER'S REACH brings the franchise back to its mythic roots by embracing traditional Irish folklore and building around a tantalizing conceit. What if there was a planet seemingly untouched by the conflicts of the Star Wars universe, where the inhabitants had never even heard of Jedis or the Sith or Empire, or even the Force? How would someone, especially a child, react to coming across one of those things for the first time? What kind of folklore would they create to give these unknown entities shape? And how could that very sense of mythology be used against them? To explain all that, I'd have to spoil SCREECHER'S REACH, and honestly, it's something you want to go into relatively cold, experiencing its twist with fresh eyes. It's 12 minutes long, it's on Disney Plus, and like I said, it's a masterpiece. Go watch it and come back to this video. Okay, fine, I know nowadays people consume movies and TV through explained videos like this, so I'll give a rundown of the story. Dal is a young girl working as a child laborer on a factory on a distant planet, where she dreams of something more beyond the drudgery of the workhouse. One day, clutching her pendant, she makes the decision to leave her workstation and head out to SCREECHER'S REACH, a mythical cave said to be the home of a fearsome ghost, where no person has ever returned alive. Her and her friends steal speeders and set across the wilderness to find this ghost. Dal says she heard the phantom is not an actual physical being, but something that only exists in one's mind. As the kids approach the maw of the cavern, their fun, adventurous spirit quickly turns to dread. Dal gathers her courage by speaking to her pendant and remarking vaguely of how dark places like the Reach are tests. They reach the heart of the cave and hear a long, drawn-out gasp. The cave crumbles amongst the piercing screams. Dal's friends scramble back the way they came, but Dal herself insists that she stay alone to face the monster. The craggy darkness slowly constricts around her, and then the ignition of a laser sword fills the room blood crimson. The ghost is very physically real, and possessed with real magical power. In a desperate escape, Dal taps into that very same power, crushing the Screecher under a rock. The dust settles, and the light of day reveals the true nature of the creature, a human woman. An old gray-haired hermit with distended fingers wearing tattered garments. A struggle then ensues for control of the saber, and locked in a life or death struggle, Dal activates the weapon and kills the unarmed woman, silencing her screams forever. Outside, Dal reunites with her friends. Then her pendant lights up and speaks to her. An angelic figure appears in the sky, a winged spacecraft. From the ship, an imposing, saintly feminine being with sinister yellow eyes and a metallic voice greets her new apprentice.
You said the test was in my mind.
The true test is always in your mind. And you did what you had to do, right? You passed.
The matron had promised Dal a new life off the planet for confronting the Screecher, never fully revealing the true nature of the ghost, or that the test would require the taking of an actual life. The young girl receives the laser sword of her slain foe, and a future among the stars that she had always desired. Dal asks her new master for one final request, if her friends can come along with her.
No. This was always for you, my young apprentice, only you.
Dal makes the choice to abandon those closest to her. She tearfully repeats the words of her eldest friend.
Don't look back. Right?
But as the darkness of the ship's doors close around her, she turns for one last glimpse of the only family and home she's ever known. Yeah, this is some heavy shit. So let's start from the top, in the Connacht province on the west coast of Ireland. The mist-shrouded hills and burial mounds served as a mythic backdrop for the medieval Irish epic poem, the Tan Bol Culna. Near the small town of Sligo lies Knocknaria, the Hill of Executions. Its summit is topped by an ancient burial cairn, attributed to the villain of the Tan, the wicked warrior queen, Maeve. She was your prototypical Lady Macbeth, a sexually voracious master manipulator who dominated and cuckolded her feckless husband for her own political ends. I mean, she started an entire war just because she was jealous of her husband's prized cattle herd and wanted to own the most virile bull in all of Ireland. In one decisive battle, her enemies were struck down with menstrual cramps. She also knew writers who used subtext and thought they were all cowards. She receives a comical death when her nephew discovers her bathing and takes his revenge for the murder of his mother by slingshotting a piece of hardened cheese at Maeve's forehead, killing her instantly. According to local legend, she was buried at Knocknaria, and the rocks of the cairn were placed there to keep her from rising again. Sligo is also the hometown of writer-director Paul Young, and without much to do in a town of 20,000, he spent his childhood out in the country, exploring haunted sites like Maeve's Cairn. Like Dal, he yearned for a much greater life that Sligo couldn't offer, and needed a way out to achieve his true potential as an animator. But he also fretted about the friends and family he would leave behind. That experience, along with the image of a ravenous spirit of corrupted womanhood buried deep underground, forms the storytelling core of SCREECHER'S REACH. Maeve's Cairn is but one of many seed, or fairy mounds, located all over Ireland. Historically, they are Neolithic passage tombs and caves, whose spiritual significance morphed over time into the gateways of the fairy otherworld of Irish mythology. In contrast to Maeve's tomb in the cave of SCREECHER'S REACH, this otherworld is often depicted as a heavenly realm full of plentiful drink and beautiful women. And its inhabitants, though at times tricksy, are generally helpful to humans, granting them wisdom and visions of the future. Of course, the mystical cave in which the hero confronts their inner selves and receives cryptic premonitions is also a quintessential part of the Star Wars canon. And guess what the old Irish root word for seed is? Yes, that's right, Sith. Okay, there's probably not any greater meaning or connection behind that. Most likely, George Lucas passively picked up on the word in his own study of world mythology, or by reading John Carter of Mars, and just thought of it as a cool, villainous name. Though by framing the Cave of Evil around Irish folklore, and making it a rite of passage to the dark side, Cartoon Saloon has in their own roundabout way reunited the seed with the Sith. For the Jedi, the conflict of the cave is spiritual and reflective. You know, Luke seeing himself as Vader on Dagobah, or Rey searching for the missing part of herself in the recursive mirrors below Octo Island. When the illusion lifts for the Jedi, they are left with nothing but themselves and what they take with them. However, for the Sith, that conflict is externalized. The chaos within is never stilled. Instead, exerted on the world to gain physical domination. The ghost is not simply an illusion of one's subconscious, but a flesh and blood enemy to be conquered. Visually, the cave in Screecher's Reach is a direct homage to, no joke, David Lynch's 1997 neo-noir film, Lost Highway. In one of the most eerie nightmarescapes ever put to film, Fred, the movie's protagonist, slips into the pitch-black shadows of his apartment hallway, and while wandering the formless, atemporal void, sees either his own reflection or a doppelganger. It's never quite clear. When he emerges back into the light, he discovers through a mysterious videotape that he had apparently brutally murdered his wife in a sudden fit of jealous rage. Dal crosses a similar shadowy threshold into a world of violence and death, of which there is no return. The test embodies the Sith code. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion I gain strength. And the cave intensifies Dal's most wild and turbulent emotions, and those feelings are sharpened by the spilling of blood. The true horror of Screecher's Reach and of Lost Highway isn't the external threat of a shape-shifting entity, but rather the latent capacity for violence that lies within us all. That even a child, otherwise full of kindness and innocence, holds an inner darkness, and under certain circumstances, could be pushed to take a life. In the cave, a single shot of the Screecher's throne room is our only glimpse into her backstory and beliefs. A ceremonial bovine skull lies next to her dais, probably a reference to Queen Maeve's prized bull, Finnbinach. Carved on the wall is a cyclical petroglyph, depicting at its center the woman reaching up to the sky at a floral object. On the edges we can make out the woman holding a sword, and next to her a smaller figure. Her child? Her apprentice? And then a scene of battle between the woman and a hooded figure that resembles the Sith Master at the end. Is the purpose of the test to finally rid the Master's foe? Did she take the Screecher's child? Or more tantalizing, is the Master herself the child of the Screecher? Kidnapped and indoctrinated into the way of the Sith, and come down decades later to destroy the last vestiges of her past? The answers may lie deeper within Irish mythology. She was thatched with elf locks, foxy grey, and rough as heather, long as a sea wrack, and inextricably tangled. Description of Brannock Boar. The mythic inspiration of the Screecher herself is also derived from the word seed. The Banshee, or the Beyond Sea, literally means fairy woman, or woman of the seed, is a female supernatural being who portends or announces the death of individuals through a loud, piercing cry. Outside of the leprechaun, the Banshee is perhaps the most recognizable figure in Irish folklore, and the Screecher in her true form physically resembles the archetypal image of the death messenger. She's an old, solitary, decrepit woman with long, flowing gray hair, dressed in plain conservative garments, and in particular matching an account of a banshee from Sligo, she wears a brown shawl. It should be noted that the traditional banshee isn't inherently wicked or dangerous. In fact, her presence oftentimes denotes nobility and wealth for the deceased. stemming from the practice of rich families hiring professional mourners to cry at funerals. These keening women would be paid in drink, which, inevitably caused issues, and drew the ire of the church. Some traditions say that keeners who were derelict in their duties, or even completely consumed by their own cries, would themselves become banshees after death. But the thing about banshees is that there isn't one singular folkloric origin, and their appearance in nature widely varies from region to region. She can be a ghost, a fairy, a human kidnapped by fairies, and even in isolated tellings, a fallen angel. For instance, the being in Screecher's Reach more resembles an aggressive and sinister version of the Banshee found in the southern part of Ireland, the Bibe. Bibe's lineage stretches back to the war goddess of the same name, who foretold of and rejoiced in the slaughter of battle, washing the bloodied clothes and armor of the slain afterwards. She takes the form of a scald crow, which in the short is reflected in the initial inky impressionistic shape of the Screecher, avian talons, her hair spread like wings, her skull almost beak-shaped. She is a creature of pure dark side energy, devoid of light except for the bloody shimmer of a lightsaber blade. The battle with the Screecher breaks the Sith philosophy down to its most warlike, animalistic essence. Survival of the fittest, kill or be killed. No ideology exists between the individual and their enemy, other than might equals right.
It is conflict that improves the lot of civilization and single being both. Conflict forces one to better oneself. It forces change, growth, adaptation, evolution, or death. These are not our laws, but the universe's. Without conflict, you have only stagnation.
But she is also a manifestation of what the Sith fear the most: death. Throughout Star Wars, we see individual Sith scheme to prevent the death of their loved ones, or even themselves, from Anakin to Plagueis the Wise, and yes, even Emperor Palpatine. Unlike the Jedi, death is not something to be accepted with a sense of peace and purpose. It must be conquered. The Sith are agents of slaughter and destruction, who claim the dark side is the true natural way of the universe, yet they cling desperately to life, and try to artificially extend it at any cost.
Ironic.
For Dal, her face-to-face confrontation with death is her initiation into the Sith, but it brings no comfort, no peace, no understanding, only further stirring the fear in her heart. The whole round of existence is accomplished within her sway, from birth through adolescence, maturity, and senescence to the grave. She is the womb and the tomb, the sow that eats her pharaoh. Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces. Nowadays, the dark side as toxic masculinity is pretty much the baseline reading of the Sith, a culture of domination, unrestrained rage, fascistic order, and emotionally stunted men. But enough about Star Wars, YouTube. Screecher's Reach, on the other hand, presupposes how the dark side would manifest in the feminine. Now, there are plenty of female dark side users in Star Wars lore, but I don't think I've ever seen any of them fly in on a giant vulva. Okay, fine. Art director Almu Redondo says the ship is supposed to be a flower, though it's kinda hard not to get all yonic when you use that to signify the female form. The name of the master is only ever mentioned in the credits: Sith Mother, as in Mother Superior, or the Virgin Mother of Jesus. Her raiments resemble that of a nun's habit, but far more ostentatious, as is her flowery, vulvic ship with wings like a dove's, that are also tapered to a dangerous, thorny point. A grand display of heavenly power, that much like a cathedral is meant to overwhelm the average layperson in complete awe. For someone living on an isolated rural planet, it's as if an actual goddess has kissed the ground, though an audience even vaguely familiar with Star Wars knows that there is a duplicity and deceit behind her immense calming presence. She preys on Dal's need for purpose and maternal guidance, almost like an inversion of Obi-Wan Kenobi. To that end, Dal, the Sith Mother, and the Screecher each represent stages of womanhood that have been corrupted in some way, And I can see all you Wiccans excitedly raising your hands in the back to mention the triple goddesses of Hecate and the Morrigan. Well, first off, the concept of a universal goddess embodying the maiden, the mother, and the crone that exist across multiple religions is a modern neo-pagan invention, rather than one rooted in ancient occult practices. I don't have the time to go on a tangent about the triple goddess, so Dr. Angela Puka has a great video explaining its origins that is well worth watching, though that doesn't mean that either the maiden, mother, or crone don't exist as individual mythic archetypes, or that certain figures could take on multiple forms of the cycle. The Morrigan herself is the sister war goddess of Bive, and could transform into, among other things, a beautiful young girl, or an aged hag. And in addition to the traditional image of the elderly gray-haired Banshee, some accounts also describe them as a child or as a seductive young woman. Each stage of life offers a spiritual truth. The youthful lady of purity and boundless potential, the life-giving mother possessing societal and sexual power, the crone with decades of accumulated wisdom who guides the living into death. But Irish mythology also pulses with the fear of these feminine archetypes disrupting the patriarchal status quo. If this all sounds gender essentialist and out of touch with our modern conception of gender, well, it is. I mean, it's not all that surprising considering these stories were mostly written down by sexually repressed men living in monasteries. It's a good thing that we now have mainstream genre fiction that interrogates gender in more than superficial ways. Yet, these traditional archetypes still hold power in our collective imaginations. Dal is a child full of wonder and kindness, who becomes a killer. The mother, like Queen Maeve, is everything a maternal figure shouldn't be. She lies to her ward, deliberately puts her into danger, and takes away her innocence. Her idea of nurture is a cruel, survival of the fittest struggle, with the end goal of shaping Dal into an extension of her own ego. The old woman in the cave is completely lost in her own grief, and would rather destroy herself, and Dal along with her, than allow the younger generation to live on. It really brings it back to that Joseph Campbell hero with 1,000 faces element that has been at the core of Star Wars since the beginning. The confrontation between the hero and their parental figure. Metaphorically speaking, it's about the hero grappling with the reflection of their innermost psyche. Though of course, Star Wars is also full of actual physical conflicts between parent and child. For the Jedi, this conflict is resolved through what Campbell called the atonement with the Father. The abandoning of their ego for a greater spiritual revelation. Luke laying down his weapon in the Emperor's throne room, and Vader's redemptive act. Rey reconciling with the failures of Luke on Ahch-To, and finding belonging and purpose among the Resistance. For the Sith, it's, well...
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
And perhaps that's why I love the theory of the Sith mother being the daughter of the Screecher. You are not wholly you. Bits and pieces of yourself are inherited or learned from others. To be a child or a student to someone means that part of yourself is inextricably tied to another person. Instead of peacefully reconciling that like the Jedi, the all-consuming egoism of the dark side seeks the annihilation of everything that threatens the self, including one's own parents or mentor. In fact, the Sith philosophy kinda expects masters and apprentices to murder each other in order to consolidate power. And it's implied that the mother may have sent countless Force-sensitive orphans to their deaths against the Screecher before Dal actually finished the job. If this is indeed matricide by proxy, then the death of the old lady is both the baptism of a Sith apprentice and the severing of the last vestiges of familial attachment for the Sith mother. The contradiction is that without any family or true friends, one's identity is more easily subsumed by the monolithic order of the dark side. The individualistic freedom offered to the supplicant is only illusory, ultimately in service of a highly conformist, fascist society, where only those at the very top are afforded any form of expression or power. Which makes the religious subversion of SCREECHER'S REACH all the more fascinating. Traditionally, in Star Wars, the Jedi are aesthetically coded as Buddhist monks. Plain brown robes, sparse temples devoid of luxury, designed to clear the practitioner's mind. Meanwhile, the Sith spaces tend to evoke the cavernous, eldritch tombs of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, monuments meant to extol the greatness of individual men. The prequels did bring the Jedi closer to Christianity with Anakin's virgin birth and the Order's bloated Vatican-style hierarchy, but Screecher's Reach puts it in much more explicit and provocative terms. That Catholic imagery is all of a piece with Cartoon Saloon's Irish Folklore Trilogy, a series of feature-length films that explored the complicated relationship between paganism and Christianity on the Isle. The first movie, The Secret of Kells, depicts a friendship between a young monastic scribe and a forest spirit that is an allegory for how the church and fairy tale tradition came together to create Irish literature. In Song of the Sea, it's a bit more ambivalent. Modernity has made Catholicism staid and boring, contrasted with a more vibrant, adventurous, but also dangerous world of the fairies. Then Wolfwalkers shows how that modernity was violently achieved, and ends with the protagonist rejecting the industrious Protestantism of the English, and embracing the collective spirituality of the Irish wilderness. By contrast, in Screecher's Reach, we see wickedness manifest in both the pagan-coded wilds of the Banshee and in the Catholic-coded, civilized evil of the Sith. On one extreme, it's complete animalistic id, and on the other, totalitarian order, the two-sided nature of the dark side. Dal's story echoes none other than that of St. Patrick himself, who was kidnapped into slavery as a teenager and later guided to freedom by a mysterious voice urging him to flee into the wilderness. While St. Patrick never wielded a sword, the test he was put through during his mission work often ended with God violently disposing of the druids, either by burning them alive or dashing their skulls against the rocks. In a similar way, one could read Dal's battle with the Screecher as her confronting an eldritch pagan past on behalf of a vast, far more formalized religious institution. Director Paul Young jokingly described himself in a podcast interview as a raging atheist, and with that, he brings a unique secular materialist perspective that I've never really seen in a Star Wars narrative before. Of course, he takes a certain sacrilegious delight in dressing the ultimate evil of the galaxy in the habit of a Catholic nun, and nearly all the supernatural elements are revealed to have a more grounded, mundane reality behind them. The pendant Dal prays to is based on actual religious tokens from Ireland, but functionally is just a walkie-talkie, more technological than magical. The monstrous form of the Screecher, like in real-life ghost encounters, is just the impressionistic image Dal's brain perceives in the darkness. The old woman does possess force powers, but she is still very much mortal and human, and in spite of all her grandeur, the Sith Mother is no angel sent from heaven. We like to think that our most irrational fears could be conquered by the light of truth, but in Screecher's Reach, the tangible reality is far more terrifying and evil than any mere ghost. This story, set in a galaxy far, far away, evokes real-life historical abuses. First, the Irish workhouses, where orphan children labored for 60 hours a week in cramped, meager, and diseased living spaces. For the ruling English of the 18th and 19th century, this was seen as charity, though in practice it was industrialized cruelty to fuel a rapidly expanding empire. Across the pond in the Americas, missionaries and church-backed residential schools presented themselves under the compassionate guise of Christian grace, but were in fact similarly designed to remove indigenous children from their communities and indoctrinate them under dehumanizing and deadly conditions. Likewise, behind the saintly facade of the Sith Mother lies a life of isolation and abuse for Dal, and depending on where this story falls on the Star Wars timeline, is likely also another tendril of Imperial power. And unlike the rest of the Vision shorts, which present victories over real-life inspired colonial oppression, there is no light side bright enough to bring true balance, no rebel figure to save these children at the last moment. As in our world, evil exploits the desperate and defenseless, oftentimes without any semblance of recourse, and in some cases, its victims become perpetrators themselves. If the Sith mother was indeed kidnapped as a child from her own mother, then it's not a stretch to imagine Dal also becoming an agent of that dark side order and continuing the cycle. However, the actual choice Dal makes in SCREECHER'S REACH is much more immediate and grounded than merely good versus evil. She has to choose between her own aspirations and her communal obligation to friends and family. Luke Skywalker faces a similar conflict at the start of Star Wars. You know, until Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru get cooked, and then there's literally nothing left for him on Tatooine, other than his off-screen friends at Tosche Station.
And Tosche Station is proud to present the Power Converters! Oh yeah!
By contrast, all Dal has is her friends, and the brilliance of Cartoon Saloon's animation is that we feel like we know them intimately, just from a couple of minutes of screen time. The rambunctious and mischievous redhead mechanic, the sugary, sweet, littlest alien, the eldest who tries to project a fatherly presence the best he can. We actually get a palpable sense of what Dal is leaving behind when she chooses to face the Screecher alone, even before she herself realizes it. It's a scrappy, lost boy's existence, filled with potential danger, but one nevertheless built around a deep, abiding familial love. And there's a sort of dark folkloric morality in how she gets exactly what she wanted, while losing everything she needs, in just a brief flash of ego-driven bravery. When the Sith Mother offers the choice in more explicit terms at the end, there really is no choice at all. Dal had already made a deal in blood, and to renege would mean her own blood, and likely the blood of her friends would also be spilled. That inherent tension between individualistic desire and the desire for a sense of community has become a thematic motif for many recent movies and TV shows. The phrase, "follow your dreams," is a lot more complicated in an age of loneliness, where tangible social connections are more frayed than ever, and the pursuit of said dreams can feel even more isolating. I mean, that's literally the plot of Pixar's Soul, and post-pandemic life has only amplified the issue. In the past, our culture has glorified the idea of achieving individual greatness through personal and emotional sacrifice, and then COVID shifted how we value our communal lives. The two aren't necessarily irreconcilable. Clearly, from the behind-the-scenes featurettes, Paul Young still found his tribe away from his hometown. But through his art, he articulates the fear of losing touch with the people and places that made you when you step out into the unknown. SCREECHER'S REACH touches such a raw nerve precisely because it is a discomforting fairy tale for a discomforting era. One that stands out in the sea of Star Wars shows that aspire to be little more than nostalgic, fanboy-friendly comfort food. For some, that comfort is exactly what they want out of this franchise, and there's nothing inherently wrong with enjoying that. For me though, SCREECHER'S REACH and the other Vision shorts offer a tantalizing glimpse into an alternate, much more creatively daring Star Wars universe. The same one where Lord and Miller released their comedy version of Solo, where Guillermo del Toro realized his Jabba the Hutt gangster epic, where the series took on Rian Johnson's visually bold, forward-thinking approach to storytelling, rather than receding back into the nostalgic playpen.
Very good.
Cartoon Saloon did something totally magical here. It made me fall in love with Star Wars again. And while at 12 minutes, the technical scale of SCREECHER'S REACH is slight compared to the studio's feature films, the ambition of its storytelling, the layers of mythic, historical, and spiritual meaning packed into every frame is no less grand. It's a masterpiece that more than stands among their other masterpieces. I'm not kidding. It is the best Star Wars thing ever made.